Alright guys, welcome back. This is part 3 of the transparency and keying tutorials from the second series for Grass Valley's EDIUS 6. Alright, so what we're going to cover today is transparency once again, but transparency in the form of chroma key. So when we use a chroma key to create transparency, we open up a whole new world of creativity once again. I know I say that every episode, but trust me, having the ability to shoot chroma key is really fun and really cool. I mean, Hollywood blockbusters do it all the time. Robust key, we can pull keys better than I can pull in After Effects, and that's saying something. But first, I want to cover how we can use the built-in keyer and see why we may or may not use that over the robust keyer. I also want to cover how the keyer works, and once you understand how things work, we get to push it further and we get to manipulate how things work and we get to control things better, and that way you can get better results. So first of all, what we're going to do is have a look at our now famous guy from the Miami Heat video. I think he's starting every tutorial, and let's just have a look at the raw footage, shall we? Let's just jump straight into it. I'm going to go to footage, chroma key, and let's have a look here. Here is our shot. So shot on the Canon 5D Mark II. I actually lit the green screen with fluoro, so it's actually a bit blue, but it's still going to work. And yeah, so this is a relatively easy key to pull because, you know, there's no long hair and it's very cleanly shot. And although there's an out of focus shoulder area here, we'll deal with that in a second. So let's jump in and get started. I'm going to drag my clip down here and let's just zoom in and have a look. So here is our man. And what we want to do is go to Effects, scroll down to Keys, and we go Chroma Key. So let's drop Chroma Key on our transparency track. Now straight away, EDIUS does a pretty damn amazing job of keying that footage. So let's have a look at the properties of that keyer. But actually, before we do that, what do I mean by key that footage? What does that actually mean? Well, we learnt a whole lot about alpha channels before, right? Now an alpha channel is the transparency of this transparency track, but instead of just transparency based on opacity, it's transparency based on a shape. Now when we shoot green screen, let's just turn off our chroma key, then what we're actually doing is saying turn everything that's green into an alpha channel, turn everything that's green into completely transparent, and that way we can place our man on top of some sort of different background, or you know what I mean. So basically we're creating transparency just like we did with an alpha channel, but we're using chrominance values rather than luminance values, or rather than a alpha channel. Now I know I'm repeating all these words and terms and it might sound very confusing, but if you just get it into your brain that when we talk about transparency, it's exactly that. These are the holes that get cut into our image, what shines through. And basically with the chroma key, we want anything to shine through the hole that the green will create. But the difficult part is creating the hole. I mean, it's easy when you have an alpha channel, it's easy when you draw a mask because we can easily create a perfect hole. But in this instance, we want to create a perfect cutout of this guy. So what we're going to do is drop our chroma key filter on. And we can't really see that there's a hole just now, so we need to put a background behind him. So what I'm going to do is I think we'll just grab the flames for now. It's an easy one. And if we put the flames behind him, we can see that we've effectively cut him out, and it looks pretty good. But if we have a look closer, there are a couple of problems. There's some pixelation going on here, and there's kind of like this green glowing edge on him. So we're going to work out how we can fix that. We're also going to explore other ways to pull a key in EDIUS without actually using the chroma key filter. We're going to be revisiting the chrominance filter too, which is pretty cool because it really explains to you, it gets under the hood of what really happens in a chroma key situation. But first let's have a look at the chroma key. So let's click on our transparency track that we already have the chroma key filter on, and if we go to information, chroma key, double click that. Now the chroma key looks like this as standard, but what we want to do is expand the details. We want to get out of dummy mode. So if we click detail here, you can see that we have more options available to us. Now, what I want to show you first is what a key does. So if we display the key by saying key display, now you can see, just like we did with a wheel in the previous tutorial, we're saying anything that's white, we want that to be our feature, and anything that's black is transparent. So what a chroma key does is essentially creates an alpha channel, but the way it does it is it chooses a color to do that. So let's turn our key off, and EDIUS has automatically picked green for us. It just guessed straight away that this is the green we want. But really what happened behind the scenes is this color picker picked green. So I'm going to do that again. I'm just going to click here, and what if I click around? Notice how all these numbers are changing. If I click closer here, different areas of the green, it's because the green that I've lit in the background is not completely even. So depending on which color I pick will give me a different result. See this green edge around here, and the shape of my key will change based on the color that I pick. And then we can go in and refine what's happening with this keyer. We can refine these values. Now what does Y mean? Remember YUV, the YUV curve, they represent Y, which is brightness, U and V, which are the color channels. So if we play with the brightness, look what happens. It starts to destroy our key. If we turn the key on, you'll see what I mean. So we want this to be completely black. If we slide this Y around, you might have the key turned on, so we see the final result. You might not notice that there's problems with your key. It's always very safe and wise to turn on your key and have a look at what is actually happening. Obviously, the final result is very important, but without having a look at the key, we can't really see if there's any holes in our key. What do I mean by holes? These are holes, these are problems. And what if we had a hole inside of him? Now, I mean, look at this. If I slide the color around and choose a different color, that anything that's white is actually a hole, so that stuff's going to shine through. So if I turn my key display off and press OK, you can see we're having big problems here. And the poor guy's on fire. It doesn't look very good. But it's more than that. There's massive problems. For a start, we haven't gotten rid of our green. We've created an alpha channel based on the color of his jacket. So let's go back into the chroma key settings. Let's click on the dropper and re-click green. And straight away, the settings change. So we can choose these the way we want based on sliding them, or a really simple, quick way is just to use the eyedropper. Now once we have the color set, the color of our green is represented by these numbers here, the Y, U and V. So that actually 111-13258 is that green right there. So we're telling EDIUS to get rid of that color. But then we also have these fine tuning. So the base of the chroma. So what color green, how many variants of green do we want to include? And what range? How many steps of that green? So if we have a look at our key and slide those around, you can see now I have a terrible key. We've got holes in there. And what I mean by holes, well, let's turn the key off again and have a look. You can see now the flames are coming through him. We don't want that. So let's drag the range back, and that's looking much better. Now you can see when I drag the range around as well, we're getting different results. Now the best way I understand these sliders are, if you look at the base and the range, the base is the color we're choosing, the range is how feathered that color selection is. So what we want to do is find a good base that cuts off this edge and gives him a nice clean edge, and then we minus or plus the range without putting holes in the image. So you can see here that might look good, but I can see straight away if we go to our key, there's a problem here. Now that is a big problem because as soon as you try and composite him into a scene, you're going to start seeing through him into that hole. So you've got to be very careful. So once I've played around with my chroma base and range, I can play around with my luma base and range. Now fortunately I've shot this quite safely. I mean, it's pretty easy to key this shot. So we don't really need to play with the settings. But there are extra settings that we can choose. I mean, what does this rectangle do? If we click the rectangle, then it limits us to one area. And why is this useful? Well, what if we had a light over here in the shot? Well, we could just simply draw a box around him, and that means the light would not be included because we're saying don't key anything to the left of that shot. And I'll show you an example of that later on, but that's what the rectangle's for. So we don't actually need it in this shot. But what does cancel color mean? Well, let's have a look. Cancel color is designed to try and get rid of a green cast that happens when an actor stands too close to a green screen. And even though this guy is not too close to the green screen, you can still see there's quite a green edge here. But we're going to try and fix that another way. Unfortunately, this image doesn't have a real cast. There are slight shades of green here coming through, and this is what cancel color is designed to do. Because what it does, just like we saw with the three-way color corrector, anything that is one color can be cancelled out by its opposite color. Now EDIUS knows that, so what it does is it says push red into green values. So if we do that to extreme, there's the red. That's the opposite of the green that we're seeing here. So EDIUS is mathematically giving us a cancelled color. So when this is on, it's actually helping us make our image not look green and not have a green tint. So now we have a pretty good looking key simply using the eyedropper and, playing with some details. So let's have a look at a more difficult key. Let's press OK and have a, that's pretty damn good as is, although I don't really like this green edge. But we're going to combat that later. So next up, I'm going to try something slightly more difficult. We're going to go to a shot of my girlfriend here. So we'll go to chroma key. And we're going to choose this shot here where she's wearing the scarf. Now you can see, like I said before, maybe there's a light in the shot or a fan in the shot, and that's where we can use that rectangle to help crop those out. So this is a much more difficult shot to key. One, because I didn't light the green screen as well, so you can see some variances in green. Plus it's really blue, it's not even green. And yeah, having variances in your background is a big problem. It does introduce problems. Secondly, we have hair flying around, lots of super fine detail here that you can see is going to definitely present us with a challenge. Not only because it's super fine detail, and it gets blended into the background, like you can see here that this hair is actually turned green, but because we're working with limited resolution of 5D Mark II plus the high compression of H.264, we're definitely going to see some problems here, but let's have a go anyway. So I'm going to drop that clip on my timeline, and I'm going to go to Effect, Chroma Key, and I'm going to drop that onto my transparency track. Straight away, EDIUS does a pretty good job, nowhere near as good as before, so we definitely need to tweak this a little bit. And we may as well put a background behind Laura. So I've just downloaded a really simple background that, it's not a very good composite we're doing here, but just to give you the idea. I hate doing it half-assed, but you know what? I'm trying to teach you principles here, and I want you to make the magic. Anyway, so as you can see here, our image does not fit the width of our screen. If we just turn Laura off for a second, you can see here that we have some black bars. So what we need to do is go to our dark alley image, go to information, go to the layout tool, and instead of stretching it manually like so, we can go to preset fit width, and that way it just fits the width nicely. And now I'm just going to slide this down a bit so we can see the top of that street light, because I'm going to help use that to maybe suggest that the street light is lighting her. So now I'm going to press OK. So now we have our background, and I'm going to turn on my key track, and you can see here that she's almost ready to go. But the problem is we have a lot of problems with our chroma key and the light and the fan. So let's combat that. So we'll click on the transparency track, go to the chroma key, and let's have a look. So we go key display, and you can see, yeah, we've got problems here. So what we need to do is go detail. Before we do that though, we can simply grab our eyedropper and just try clicking different parts of the image. So now if I click this side, we're getting a much cleaner, more beautiful key on the right, but because of the variance in color of my green screen, we're getting problems on the left. So let's try the left, and you can see it's not really helping. So what are we going to do? Oh, there's a middle ground. So I've found a spot in our chroma key. I found a piece of green that has similar properties on both sides. So straight away I've already solved a few problems just by picking a better green. So next up, under the detail settings, I'm going to play with my base. Now if I push my base up, you can see it starts crushing and shrinking my matte. So watch the closeness of her hair here. As I increase the chroma base, I'm getting a much tighter key. But the problem is, we're losing detail. Remember that hair came right out here? Well, now it's all gone because that key is actually green, you can see here. But this is the problem we have. We have limited resolution, and it's very difficult to key things using the simple chroma key built in with EDIUS and get awesome results. So now if we move the range, it crushes it even further. But we are getting a pretty acceptable looking key now. Even though we've lost detail, at least we don't have an ugly green edge, and at least we don't have problems over here. So let's have a look at the key display just to check. So that's looking pretty good. Now next up we want to get rid of the fan and get rid of this light. So we can draw a rectangle around her like so. And let's have a look at our key, and straight away we've gotten rid of that. So we're looking pretty good. Let's press OK. Now we've created a key that looks pretty darn good. I mean, I'm pretty happy with that. This is, did I just mention, I didn't, that this is real time, people. I'm playing that in real time off a laptop with a H.264 file, full HD, chroma keyed. EDIUS is winning. So next up I'm going to show you how we can pull a key without actually using the chroma key filter. I'm going to go back to our famous dude from Miami Heat, and I'm going to drop him in, and I'm going to drop him down here. Now I'm just going to create a red background behind him. So if I right click in here in a blank space in my bin and go new clip, color matte, and I'm going to create red because it's the opposite of green, and it'll really help us see any green edge or spill that we might have. So I'll press OK, and I'll drop that underneath him and just trim that out. So you can see now nothing's happened because we need to add the chroma key effect. But what I want to show you is we're not actually going to use chroma key, we're going to use chrominance. I'll drop that on the video track. Now let's go into chrominance. You remember this from the previous color tutorials. But what we're going to do now is go to our funny wheel picker thing on the side, and we're going to show the key, and we're going to show a histogram. Now you can see here clearly where all the green lies in this image, and that's the part we want to key. So let's move this little slider around, and drag it over the green, and look what happens. We've created a key straight away. Now why would I use this instead of using the chroma key filter? Well, I'll show you. There's a few cool reasons. For one, it teaches you what's really happening in a chroma key. Two, you feel good because you know what's happening. But three, you have this shape alpha where we can soften the edge of our key. Now we do have a softened edge in the chroma key built in EDIUS, but I find it does not work anywhere near as good as this. Plus there's a few extra things we can do to refine our key in here, and one of them is the soft edge. So if we go to the color and we go to the alpha of our color and we increase that, you'll see these little blue handles pop out. Now what that's doing is it's taking the hard edge off our selection here. It's giving it a soft edge. So if we increase it just a little bit and then we move that around, we get a nicer, cleaner edge that doesn't have as jaggedy edges because we've softened the selection. So what that does, it slowly eats into the edge of our image because the edge of our image actually contains a bit of green. Remember we saw that? So now it's looking pretty good. And as you can see, if I move it around, the key gets bigger and smaller. Now we definitely don't want to include any skin tones, and we definitely don't want any shirt, but we want the tightest, softest key possible without it shrinking our image too much. So now if we turn the key off and have a look, nothing's happened. So what are we going to do about this? Let's press OK. Now remember earlier in the tutorial just before this one, we created alpha mats, track mats. Let's do that exact thing again, but we're going to use this as our alpha channel. So what I'm going to do is duplicate this layer and drag it above it. So I'm going to click, drag, press Control and let go. Now I'm going to take off my filter of chrominance and press delete. So what I have is the top layer, and then I have an alpha channel underneath it, and then I have my bottom layer, which is the red background. So what I'm going to do is put a track matte on this top transparency track. So if I put track matte here, now what's happening is by default the track matte is always on luminance, but the problem is it needs to be inverted. So let's click invert, and whammo, we've created our own chroma key. We're not using the chroma key filter, and I find I get better results this way. Why? Because there's a few steps more that we can take. One of them is we can actually put a filter on our track matte. So what I'm going to do is drop a blur filter on that second layer. So I'm going to go to smooth blur, and drop it on our track matte layer. Just to reiterate, this is the layer we're affecting. So I'm going to double click the blur, and watch what happens when I increase it. We're getting a soft edge on our key. We're getting rid of the green. And sometimes this is really handy when you have a difficult key to pull. And it just softens up those pixels on the edge. It just gives you an extra layer of control, and it actually blurs it outwards rather than inwards. So if we blur that by a value of 6, and then we can go back to our chrominance effect and set the blur of that alpha channel. So we have 2 layers of blur here. Now this key's looking pretty awesome, and we're not even using a chroma key to do it. Finally, there's one more step that we can try. There is a thin green line around here, and if you remember from the previous tutorials, we can use a 3-way color corrector to limit that color. So let's try. If we limit the hue, drag it into green, let's turn histograms on and have a look. You can see already when I drag it into green, it is in fact looking at the edge, plus it's found green in here as well. Let's turn on saturation and luminance. And as I drag these around, you can see that the edge is being picked up only. And actually, you know what? Let's just leave this selection that it's finding here, these green parts on the shirt. And let's expand the colors a little bit. Let's just feather them out a little bit. Is desaturate that green. So we can just pull saturation down. So now we don't actually have a green edge at all. We've completely gotten rid of the green, we've softened the edge, and we just have more control. Plus we have a better understanding of what's happening with this chroma key. So I urge you to play with these 2 methods and see which one works best for you. But for now, I'm going to leave the built-in chroma keys that come standard with EDIUS, and we're going to have a look at a third-party plugin called Robust Key. This keyer is awesome. It's not free, but if you ever do find yourself struggling with the built-in keys and you want, ultimate control, I highly recommend looking at Robust Key. Now I've installed Robust Key, and you can see it here, it pops up in my standard filters list. So at the bottom here I have ISP Clip Alpha, ISP Robust Key, and Robust Key Green. So what we're going to be looking at today is the Robust Key Green chroma keyer. Now the example we're going to work on is a video that I actually shot for a pre-wedding video in Hong Kong earlier this year. If you have a quick look on my Vimeo channel where these tutorials are found, you'll see one here called Hong Kong Love. Now Hong Kong Love was a concept that I quickly came up with basically because this couple just wanted something original and in my opinion something a bit cheesy, but it turned out really well in terms of results and I'm really happy with it. And it sort of gave me more confidence to try, just quick and easy, quick and dirty green key effects. And I urge you to do the same because it's actually pretty easy to get great results, especially with an EDIUS. Now I call this advanced chroma keying because in this way we're not just placing a simple foreground object onto a simple background object. We're actually creating a dynamic scene where people walking in front of these billboards, but there's also this green in the background which is a problem, and you'll see where I ran into a lot of problems. Anyway, let's get started. And I'll show you how the standard keyer doesn't really help us too much in this situation. So what I'm going to do is grab this clip and duplicate it. This is one that I've actually finished, but we'll go through on how I got these results. But what I'm going to do is duplicate this top track and move it over here. And then I'm going to delete the filters that I have. And you can see here, this is the plate that I started with. I just decided to go out and buy a whole roll of green screen, and then we found a not too busy street and just cut out these green bits of material and pasted them onto the bus stop. So the idea was that the big signs on the bus stop would be like an iPhone where they could flip images back and forth. And I think it turned out pretty well. The only problem being is that we're working once again with quite low resolution on the 5D Mark II, and you might think 1080p is high resolution, but the way that that camera deals with pixels, it actually isn't true 1080p resolution. And especially with a wide angle lens, you start losing detail. Yeah, but anyway, let's not complain about the camera. It's awesome and it changed my life. But the point is, to get a perfect key, you'll see that we're going to have some problems, and that's where we need the third-party keyer. But anyway, let's have a look at how we can achieve the result with a standard keyer. So I'm going to go Effects, and I'm going to go down to chroma key and drag that on here. Now straight away, EDIUS has done a great job of, just creating a rough alpha channel for you to have a look at. But if you have a look closely, we've got some problems. The edges are very jaggedy. The edges are quite thick, so the key hasn't really cut into our subject. So it hasn't really separated very well the foreground from what will be the background. So next up, what I needed to do was place images onto these black areas. So the way I did that was I downloaded some stills from Google. Here's one for example, actually. Let's use a chick. And now remember that these are a background image, so they need to be placed under our chroma key. Now anything placed under this image will shine through that alpha channel, remember that. So even if we put flames there, for example, let's just drop some flames there real quick, whoops, underneath, the flames will be burning through the hole, which is pretty cool. But the idea is not that. So let's grab a still and place that underneath. Now next up what I did was, went to the information of the still, went to the layout tool, and then I shrunk it down. So basically what I've done is gone through each of the 4 images and just made them fit into the bus stop sign just like that. So that was the first step. Actually what I might do is go back to the layout tool, and not only did I shrink it, I moved them. So I'm going to place one here. Now as you can see, if we double click this image, you can see the edge is very jaggedy and we have a green line, and it's not working very well. So yes, we can go into the properties of the chroma key. So let's double click that and have a look. Now what did we do last time? We mucked around choosing different greens. Let's have a look at the key display and have a look what happens when we choose different shades of green. You can see another problem we have here. It's creating holes up here because the green's been reflected on these metal bits. So we'll combat that problem later too. But what I'm going to try and do, that's looking pretty good. Next up I'm going to go to detail and play with the chroma base. That's looking better. See how it's shrinking our key down. And the range also. So just get it to a point where, if we turn our key display on, looking much better. At least she doesn't have a green edge anymore. But we're running into other problems now. Because look at this. We're actually keying the green plants, not just the green material. So this is a problem when you shoot chroma key, and I didn't even think of this on the day, that the background is actually green. But fortunately we have the tools to fix that. But anyway, what we don't have is multiple rectangles. So I can't draw a rectangle around, I can draw a rectangle around one of these, which would help fix the problem. Because that way we're ignoring the green plants, right? And we're ignoring those top things. But that doesn't help us because we only have one rectangle, right? So, and you can also see it doesn't really help us because, well, it does help us in this situation, but what we would also have to do is go back to our still and actually crop the still. So if we go to the crop, we'd have to crop that like this. And as you can see, what looked, or what I thought was going to be a simple job turned into like a nightmare, basically. So now we're getting somewhere, but have a look at this. We've still got that ugly edge. We've still got that really pixelated edge. And that's something that, soften edge might be able to help with. So if we go back to our chroma key and we take the rectangle off and we go to soft edge mode, you can see the soft edge mode doesn't work too well. We've softened the edge, so now it's not as pixely, but we're struggling. We're struggling to pull a key because now it's starting to eat into a dress. And if we look at the actual key, yes, the edges are softer, but they're still quite pixely, and there's still some green there. So using the standard keyer works, but let me tell you, it's a lot more work, because basically what I would have to do is go in and I would have to draw a rectangle around every single one and then duplicate that layer for each one of these, and let me tell you, it would just be a nightmare, an absolute nightmare. But don't get me wrong, it can be done. I just know for a fact that you can get much better results with RobustKey. So let's have a look at RobustKey and let's see how we can achieve those results. So I think I'm just going to go over to my example just to save some time here, and let's have a look at the final result. Now the final result, you'll see, has a much nicer edge. I mean, let's go over here and have a look. So you can see here there's a little bit of pixelation, but the edge is a hell of a lot nicer, much nicer. Plus the other key actually ate into her leg. It cut the key so tight to try and get rid of the green that it actually discarded too much information. So there's no key here where her leg is or where his leg is, but as soon as we get to the actual keying area, once we started to crush it too much with the standard keyer, we lost too much of our edge, and basically this is where you really need an advanced keyer to help you. And the beauty is, this is the ultimate beauty, is that we can embed robust key inside of a mask. Now you think, well, I mean, how is that useful? Well, let me show you. Let's go back to our example over here. Now what I'm going to do is go to Effect, and I'm going to get my mask and place that on top track. And then I'm going to double click my mask, and now I can draw a mask around each one of these, remembering that we can have multiple masks within the mask filter. So there's 1, 2, and these don't have to be exact, they just have to be around that green area. And number 4. So now what we're going to do is go to the inside filter, and we're going to place the chroma key filter inside, not the standard chroma key filter, we're going to place the robust key filter inside these masks. So let's press OK. And now we're going to set that up. So I'm going to move this over here so we can see what we're doing, and set up the filter, and set up the filter. And now let's have a look at these controls. It's pretty simple the way it's laid out. Let's just use the eyedropper, and let's click the green, just like we did with the standard keyer. And look at that, straight away it's done an excellent job. I mean, let's just press OK, press OK again, and have a look. Yeah, we got some pixelation here, but it's not too bad. And we haven't actually affected any of the settings yet, so I'll show you what they can do. But that's a hell of a lot better than what we got with the standard keyer, plus we don't have an ugly green edge. But the only other problem we do have now is we have these green parts up here, but the good thing is they're not being keyed, so we can fix that later with simple color correction. But the most powerful part of this is that we have the ability to use masks and put the key inside the mask, because you'll notice that the robust key filter does not live on the transparency track like the standard key does. The robust key filter lives on the top track just like any other filter. And this is the reason it makes it so powerful, because we can embed it within a mask. And once I did that, then I went in and I had a look at some of the detailed settings that come with robust key. Let's have a look at them now. So I'm going to go into my mask, have a look at the inside filter, robust key, and have a look at the settings again. Now the settings are things like smooth background. Remember I had an imbalance of color and brightness with the background from Laura? Well, this smooth background does some subsampling and actually tries to balance out the color from the whole background, and that'll help us pull a cleaner key overall. Then we have this really cool thing called deblocking. Now deblocking is what helps us get rid of that pixelated edge. So a deblocking value of 1 or even just 2 is so awesome. Let's just press OK and have a look. When you're working with resolution footage from the 5D Mark II, it has inherently quite a blocky compression. But look how smooth this has smoothed those edges out. Look how smooth these edges are. It's absolutely beautiful. And it's so simple, this filter. This keyer is just amazing. Go back to the settings. So here's our deblocking settings, and I could even lower that to 1 and it's still going to look good. The edge contract, this is powerful too. I can just contract my mask. What if I just go crazy with it? Look how skinny her arm's getting. Look what's happening to his pants. If I do it too much, it actually starts shrinking the mask so much that we're cutting too much information out. But the beauty is that we have control of that, where the standard keyer just contracts it based on the luma base and range. This is an actual matte choker, and this is really powerful. So we don't even need to contract our edge because we've pulled quite a successful key, as you can see here. But we could maybe contract it by 1 pixel just to clean it up slightly, but I wouldn't. I mean, this is looking really good, especially for a wide angle shot. So then there are other filters within this filter like edge blur. So we already saw that and we know what that does. Basically, just like I explained earlier, the mask radius, it's the same with these sliders here in terms of what these values do. In other words, this mask blur radius, if we slide that up here, the bottom slider underneath it is like the feather. So here's the value that we set, and then here's the feather of that value. And it's the same with edge contract. Here's the value, and here's the feather of that value. So it's a good thing to keep in mind. So I'm not going to contract the edge, and I'm not going to blur the edge, but just keep in mind that they're there. And this hair, skin, hair color, and blue, this is the same as the de-spill value. This is the same as the cancel color value. So what this will do is do what I tried to do manually earlier by selecting that green and desaturating it. Is a built-in slider that does it for us. So if you do have a green edge, you slide that to the right or left and it'll cancel out that green and create the opposite color, which will balance it out and get rid of the green edge for you. And if you were shooting blue screen, that can help with that as well. And then the de-spill is actually not the edge, but if your main subject has green reflected on him or her, then this is what helps cancel that out as well. So finally, we also have the ability to view the matte, and as always, I highly recommend it. And as you can see here, we have a problem. Now if I double click that, you can see this is not completely white. There's speckles of grey here, and that's a problem because that means that those speckles of grey are actually transparent to some degree. So it's always very safe, a very good idea to have a look at not just the result, but also the matte. And when you look at the matte, then you can play with these clip black, clip whites to try and combat those speckly areas or the holes. And these are the same as sliding around your color and luma base ranges in the standard keyer. So definitely have a play with the demo version of this robust key. It's absolutely amazing, not only because of its ease of use, but mainly because of the way it lives, not on the transparency track, but on the standard video track. So it allows us to place the filter within inside of a mask, and that's the power, that's the ultimate power here. So let's click finally result, and press OK, and press OK. So now we have quite a successful key that is, you know, almost believable. But how did I combat that green tinge, that green reflection up here? Well, let's have a look at that. You'll see I've got another mask here. If I turn that off, here comes back my green edge. So we want to get rid of that, and that's just a simple color correction technique that we've already learned in previous tutorials, but I'll quickly run over it anyway. So we'll turn the mask back on and have a look what I did. I drew a mask around the areas I wanted to affect. Then I placed a filter within inside the mask, the chrominance filter. Now, if I'm going too fast here, I'm just going to run through this. Make sure you check out the first color correction tutorials and you'll see how we did it. So I'm just going to open the settings for that. And basically I went to the side thing here, clicked histogram and show key, and then I chose that green area. I chose my key with this little thingy, and there's my key. So then I turned my key off, and then I placed a filter with inside that key, which is three-way color corrector. And within that three-way color corrector, I turn the saturation down on all channels. So that way I desaturated the green and turned it into grey. And now that grey matches the grey of the silver or the aluminium that's part of the bus stop. So that was how I combated that. Anyway, so there's some really good tips for chroma keying, and I really just wanted you to understand how chroma keying works and how it relates to transparency and alpha channels. Hopefully you've enjoyed this keying and transparency tutorial set. I plan on making more tutorial sets, and the next ones will be, you know, a little bit more fun and not so technical, hopefully. But I really believe that it's important to have a good technical knowledge, not just a creative mindset. So when those two worlds come together, that's when you start getting awesome results. So thanks for watching my videos, and thanks for all the feedback, guys. My name's Matt Scott, and I'll see you next time.